Hello and welcome to Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, have no idea how you even feel about cooking because you've never tried it before, congratulations. You are in the right place. I am DC Pierson. I am a comedian, author, enthusiastic home cook, and this week, for those of you who are regular listeners to the podcast, you will know that every episode consists of me first cooking a dish, and then I talk to a guest. I used to do them both right in a row, but then, the pandemic and everything didn't make sense to have people over and make them food and spit, effectively spit and project air at them and have them do the same to me. So haven't done exactly that in a while, but I have been making dishes on the show and then talking to people remotely. And then this week is going to be ever so slightly different. We are very busy around here in the next couple weeks, and I knew that we would be. It's not a bad kind of busy, but I really thought to myself, I'm gonna bank all of these cooking segments in advance and interviews and different things, and it just did not work out that way. So on the downside, cooking segment, not a thing this week. The only thing that I have for you to make up for that is a sensational guest. I love this guy just via his presence in everything, in his writing and on Twitter and his podcast. But we spoke to each other for the first time. I would say IRL, but not really IRL, but in voice to voice to voice. And it was fantastic. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it so much that I split it into two parts. It's going to be this week and next week. I am going to be talking on the podcast to Mr. Josh Gondelman, host of the podcast Make My Day, writer for Desus Mero, just a super, super funny guy, also known for being really nice. It's part of his brand. And as his bosses say, the brand is strong and the brand is true. Josh is an extremely, extremely nice guy, super funny. I had such a great time talking to him about cooking and baking and absolutely everything. And I really hope you guys enjoy this conversation. I really enjoyed talking to Josh, and I think you're going to enjoy hearing it. We will be back in the kitchen in a couple weeks, but in the meantime, for the next couple weeks, please enjoy this chat with Josh Gondelman. Please check out his podcast, Make My Day, and check him out right now. Let's get into it. So, Josh Gondelman. What if my voice just changed dramatically?
You're British. You host the podcast in a British accent.
Joining me today, Josh Gondelman. Today in the West Bank. For whatever reason, that is my association with British. A British newscaster voice is there would always be a period on NPR where it would switch into being BBC World Service, whatever. And for whatever reason, it was just they were way more on top of that stuff than in America. I don't know. That's always what I associate with it. I can
picture it exactly.
When I hear a British person's news voice, I just hear. Yeah. Oh, sorry. You were saying.
No. Yeah, I agree with you. Just a tentative truce, but will it last?
And you're you actually have a voice that sounds as important and tentative as the thing you're describing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just kind of a fragile accord of a person.
Were you a radio kid growing up? Did you listen to a lot of radio?
I did listen to a lot of radio. That's kind of what there was. You know what I mean? So I would listen to, let me think of important radio things. The Emerson College radio station in Boston. I could just pick it up on my clock radio in my bedroom, and I would listen. They had this awesome underground hip hop show from I think 8 to 11 and then later 9 to 11, and that's my favorite radio thing of all time. And I would also listen to baseball and basketball games on the radio, Red Sox and Celtics games.
Oh man, that is honestly, I feel like you just described for me the Venn diagram that I have for Josh Gondelman in my head, where it's alternately sort of brainy underground hip hop, like hip hop, but like from a college radio station, and then also a little bit being like a kid in the 50s where like you're picking up like baseball. You know what I mean? It's like really good natured, cool, and hip hop. I think like that's your tripartite Venn diagram for you.
That's very kind.
In my head.
I do realize that when I say that I would listen to baseball on the radio, it does make me sound like, well, it was all we could afford during the Depression. So it was all the entertainment we had.
Oh, yeah. In case it wasn't clear, I was imagining you with a like one of those like flesh colored earpieces that is like attached to like a transistor radio. And you're underneath the sheets. And your dad is in the kitchen and he's drinking and he's Chaz Palminteri. In case it was unclear at all.
Yeah. That this all checks out. My dad, famously, I wanted to say, which is not true. It's not famously, but within the family it is, was once given, I think got in trouble in the synagogue as a kid because he brought in a radio with an earpiece to like listen to some like sporting event, maybe a Patriots game or something. No, that couldn't be right because that would be a Sunday. But their family, like his uncle was a rabbi, so he was always there and was like listening to the radio and got busted once.
Oh man, that is the perfect like. Not only are you in trouble with the rabbi, but he's your uncle.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Sucks.
Yep, it's such a funny, like, what a wholesome old timey thing to get in trouble for too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. No, 1,000,000% is just like, I'm listening to the Reds game for whatever reason. It's the Reds.
Yeah.
It's it feels like a team that was like only around in the 50s, even though they still persist to this day. But yeah, no, that is, it's so, there's something so like weirdly romantic to me. 20 seconds into my own podcast, I've already taken us completely off topic. But there's something so like you read about all of these different like regional music scenes of the mid to late 20th century. And it always has so much to do with like, well, actually there was this one station and because of like the Great Plains of America, they could like get it in like Jamaica or, you know what I mean? Like they would get this great Louisiana station in Jamaica, or they would get this great like, Midwestern R&B station in like Neil Young would get it all the way up in Canada or whatever. There's something. Oh, go ahead.
Or you hear the other facet of that too is like this one DJ took a chance on this one record and people went wild for it. I love that kind of stuff.
I know, it's so neat, and it feels I want to say it feels like it doesn't happen anymore, but I'm sure it happens, just not in that form. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it probably happens just in terms of like, oh, there's like, I feel like there was a story this is probably like 10 plus years ago now, but like I remember reading that there was like this Swedish like 19-year-old bedroom like producer who was like making beats in his bedroom, and then he put a beat up on YouTube titled like Chief Keef style beat, the way that like people will do when they just put up like, this is a beat that's sort of in the style of whoever. And then when he was making his like, I think major label debut, Chief Keef was just like, because I guess what else would you do? It was just like, I need some beats for the album. I'll just put in Chief Keef type beats on YouTube.
That's amazing.
And then that ended up being a song on his album, was this like just this Swedish kid in his bedroom having made this thing, was just like, oh yeah, he like willed it into existence without even meaning to. I love stuff like that.
Me too, for sure.
So, none of that is either here nor there. I think I was maybe just caught up in the feeling of like, it's a Saturday and we're talking to each other from across the country, rather than what a normal episode of this podcast would be, which is me placing a delicious plate of food in front of you and us enjoying it and talking about it. I can't do that. So all I can do is wish that whatever you ate last was delicious and satisfying.
It was terrific.
What did you have? I
had turkey burgers with a slice of cheddar cheese on each and some sauteed broccoli with like some garlic salt and just because it's cheatier than mincing or pressing the garlic, and some crushed red pepper flakes on it.
Yum. Was that on the burger as well, or was that on the side?
I cooked the burgers up in a pan, and one of the pans I used for the broccoli and left like the red pepper flakes and a little of the oil left over.
Oh, yum.
Yeah, so that was pretty good. And I put on the burgers, I put some like adobo multi-seasoning as well.
That sounds fantastic. Are we talking like adobo, the like a chili, or are we talking like adobo, like the dish, like the like adobo seasoning? I guess I'm not even sure what I'm asking.
The seasoning of it's not the let me see. It's like a multi-spice. Yeah, it's like a combination of spices and a bunch of different like companies that make spices or sell spice. I guess they don't make them, right? You don't like make cilantro. But it's like a combination.
Not with that
I'm
attitude.
looking it up now. It's that attitude. that's what my grandfather always said. Kid, you'll never make cilantro in this town. It's like chili powder, garlic powder, onion powder. So, and it's all kind of like mixed up. And I remember it being kind of with my bosses, with Desus and Mero, we talked about it a bunch. They talked about it much on the air because when the CEO of Goya came out so strongly in favor of Trump, they were like, well, we'll all have to find a new adobo. Like that's as like it's like a seasoning blend.
Gotcha. Yes. Okay. This I feel like it's the type of seasoning that like a company like Knorr, Knorr would have, where it's just like you learn a little bit about it and you realize like, oh, this seasoning is like the backbone of an entire sort of like American community. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
yep. I think that's very that's what it is. I think when all this went down with the political maneuvering,
the politicization of Goya.
Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think, did like an Instagram story with like her family adobo blend, like talking about what her family mixes up as adobo.
Yeah, because also if you're a company where it's like your whole thing is we like sell these like spice blends and whatever. If people can make them themselves, also it's like a pandemic right now. It's like everybody just wants an excuse to be like, you know what will kill 2 hours is I'm going to start making my own adobo blend. Yeah. And then this cool congresswoman is going to tell me how to do that. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's got to really eat into your margins.
A part of someone else's family history and heritage. It felt so like intimate to like share a family recipe that way of any kind feels very intimate.
And it is interesting to learn how many of those sorts of like blends of spices that are the backbones of so many different types of cuisines, we sort of get them received as like, this is exactly what's in this. And then you learn like, no, this is like a genre.
Right. Like there's no one way to make it. And even I imagine like when it's done in a home, as many recipes are, it's like a pinch of this, a dash of that, to taste with this other thing. And so, so it's very funny, right, to feel like there's like a uniform way to make this thing that like everyone who makes it at home makes it a little differently, or, you know, I think that's really cool though.
Yeah, it reminds me of, there was a TikTok recently going around of a like Italian-American family in New Jersey, and they were all in their backyard, and it's like, okay, it's the end of summer, so it's like we're canning the tomatoes for the year. And so we're making all the tomato sauce and we're going to can it. And they just had these like giant vats, and this guy is like filming his grandma make the sauce. And he's just sort of kind of egging her on. And he's like, how much salt, grandma? How much salt? And she's like, 1. And then she just puts one entire like canister of Morton's salt into it. It was so delightful realizing that she's like, yeah, 1 salt. Like that's the smallest unit of salt.
That's
was
so funny.
So delightful. I mean, granted, it was in this giant vat where you're just like, oh yeah, that's probably the perfect amount. But it was very funny that is in fact 1 salt to her.
Right. That is the minimum unit of salt, is a full canister of salt.
So what is speaking of sort of like proprietary family recipes, is there a Gondelman, Kreisman household turkey burger? Like, what does that look like?
So we get the like whatever. So we've been getting, I'll rewind a little bit. We didn't cook much in our home, pre-pandemic. I cooked when I was single and the first year that I dated my wife, Maris. And then we moved in together, and it was a lot of like, we would, on nights that we were both free, we would go out or order in, or, you know, if I was coming home late, I would grab like a bodega turkey sandwich. And it wasn't, or Maris, who, you know, cause I'm out doing stand up when that exists. I'm out doing stand up a lot of nights. And so Maris would get home before me and eat at home. And so she would do a lot of like, you know, frozen, veggie burgers and the kind of just like heat up and go stuff. And so I've been cooking a lot more in the pandemic. Since March, I've just been like really rediscovering cooking. And it's like kind of the perfect time as like a person who is cooking for two, usually some pretty, from a pretty like small repertory of dishes lately. It's like a nice time to kind of zone out and like listen to a podcast or some music and take like, you know, whatever 30, 40, 60 minutes and like get it together. So the turkey burger that we've been doing is it's just like whatever patty. I think it might be like the Pat LaFrida ground turkey pre-made patties that they do on Fresh Direct, because we've been getting groceries delivered, and I season it on both sides a little bit and cook it up in a pan, throw a slice of cheddar cheese on there, and then, you know, ketchup, mustard to taste, on a usually just like a grocery store hamburger bun, which I like very much.
Do you have a preferred bun? Are we talking potato?
It's just like white bread bun. I do like a potato bun. We tried whole wheat just as like, you know, a measure of like, well, this is slightly less unhealthy, but the I feel like my friend Jeff Maurer, who I worked with it last week tonight, what we wrote there together, he said like one time was like, I think whole wheat was like a scam of the 90s, like a whole wheat bread as like a health food. And it stuck with me for years. And so like, but it's like lower carb, and Maris has diabetes. So like there are these like little concerns around the margins even of like, oh, a whole wheat bun is just going to like mess with her blood sugar less than a white bread bun. But I think we kind of came to the consensus that like the flavor sacrifice was not worth it.
Yeah, I do think Jeff is totally correct about that they were just like, we make it brown, and then people will go like, this is healthy because the 60s. I think it was the perfect scam to run on people who had come of age in the 60s and 70s who were now like the heads of household and had all this buying power. And they were just like, you associate brown with your older sister, Zooey Deschanel, who like ran away to join a hippie commune in the 70s, and she ate a lot of brown stuff.
It's the health
so we
food,
just make it brown.
The health food advice of like an almost famous caliber. And it's just right. It's like, it's got an earthen tone, and we say whole wheat, and it's practically a vegetable, right? Like it's from the earth.
I really do think so. I think you're right. I feel like there was a thing maybe like 10, 15 years ago, whenever it was, that we were all reading those like Michael Pollan books.
Totally.
And it was like, no. Whole wheat is just as bad, if not worse than white bread. Whole grain is good, but whole wheat is like nothing. It is just truly a multi-level grain marketing scam. You get if you become a whole wheat, I don't even know. You get like 3 of your friends into whole wheat, then you get your wheat whole for free.
You're each only selling 1/3 of a wheat if you get 3 friends to sell a whole wheat.
You're only selling the germ. Your friend is selling the husk.
This reminds me of the original nutritional pyramid scheme, the food pyramid of our youth. We're like around the same age, which with like please breads at the bottom.
Yes, exactly. So for people who don't know, this is wild to me that we somehow, I think in the 90s, like ate weirdly, it was like food is like more abundant than it's ever been. But because our parents came of age in the 50s and like the post-war era of first them just being like, there's these giant grocery stores, we have to fill them with just like all of these, deposed Nazi scientists who fled here to work on the bomb are now like just pumping out white the loaves of things and like cans full of stuff and like powders and things to go in the grocery store. And so our parents were like, okay, but we'll buy our kids that, but now it's like bright blue.
Yep. It's like we committed a war crime against the nation of Japan, and now you just chill and invent Velveeta or whatever.
And they did. And then by the time it got around to us, it was like, not only is it just a thing that's like Velveeta and it's cheese in it that can just be shelf stable and just sit out and be fine forever, that they were then like, it's now called like Velveeta Blast, extreme blasted, whatever it was. And we ate so bad.
I remember like when I was like real little, they're like, here's the 4 food groups. And I was like, got it. And then when I was in like 2nd grade, they were like, shit, we fucked up. It's not 4 food groups. It's a pyramid. Throw away the food group posters. It's this other thing. And the pyramid was like grains on the bottom and then like sugars and fats on top. And then in the middle in some configuration was like fruit, vegetable, protein, which like, that should be most of it for most people. But
I just remember that fish sitting at the top there.
Yeah. Yep. There's a fish up there. And it's like, it's just so funny. Like, I wonder what industry made that happen. Like, who was it Big Loaf of Bread? Was that the lobbying interest?
I think it was. I do think it was Big Loaf of Bread. I had another guest on, Gina LaCanina. She is in Arizona, and she works for the literal, like, the Maricopa County that Phoenix is in. Phoenix is where I'm from. She works for the basically like food. She is a like food scientist for the like Maricopa County food. I should remember what it's called, and I'm blanking on it now, but like food, like board of health basically. And they, work with schools about like nutrition and different stuff. And she was saying that, like basically it is just the farm bill that gets like passed or renewed like every couple of years. Basically all of that is just sort of like, a giant kind of weird deal with like America's like giant grain producers and soybeans and like all of these different like corporate farmers, basically, that is just directly like, it just goes from there. And like what Congress people are giving like what giveaways to who and like what corrupt deals, and it just like literally goes directly from there to like what kids eat in school, what we give them for like free or cheap like food in school, basically. Like when that is young, there's like a direct line.
It was kind of a heyday of the power of the English muffin pizza lobby, and they were living high off the hog, and just I think taken down by corruption eventually, but
unfortunately, yeah, exactly. They were able to pack so much graft into the tiny square pepperoni line item that they got too greedy.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, white bread hamburger buns.
And was there I don't know what your experience was, but I feel like there was a distinct, like, for whatever reason, elementary school, I feel like they were like, okay, we can at least acknowledge that the growing that these kids are doing right now is like a lot and like important. So I guess we should give them like, it should be on just like a normal styrofoam tray, and we should just have like fairly normal looking foods, and there should be fruit on there. So give them some like pineapple in a lot of water and all that stuff. So there was still some appearance of like trying to be healthy and balanced. And then for whatever reason, when you got to middle school or junior high, it was just a complete 180, all bets were off. You could just get like slush puppies and different, just like there was just so much sugar that you suddenly had access to in middle school lunch, and pizza and different stuff. They were just like, what the fuck ever. Like, we no longer care.
Yeah. By the time I got to middle school and high school, they had these, they must have like bought them in bulk and then just baked them in the cafeteria kitchen. But there were these giant chocolate chip muffins that tasted so good. And I realized, like, my brain was 16 years old. I should have been able to look at them and taste them and be like, I'm eating birthday cake for breakfast. And it was just like muffin, like just the idea of like what desserts are for dessert and what desserts are for breakfast is like so mysterious to me, because like, and so I've been baking lately again, which I hadn't done in a while either. And I realized, like, when I go into the office, often I'll get like a Dunkin Donuts croissant with my iced coffee on the way to work, and just like kind of shove it in my face on the train platform so that I'm not hungry until lunch. And I've been baking these batches of brownies from scratch from a family recipe. And I'm like,
wow.
oh, a little 2-inch by 2-inch brownie. That doesn't seem like breakfast, but if I eat it while I drink my morning coffee, it's like not worse than a croissant, I don't think. So I've just fully embraced like temporal food anarchy.
Oh yeah, and I mean, there is something about a particular type of dessert that I do think that's why my most common phrase when either eating an actual dessert that my wife Haley has made, because she does most of the baking, or watching Great British Baking Show is, oh, that would be great with a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Like there's something about it. It's like you put it next to a cup of coffee and suddenly it's breakfast.
It's so good. And I'm not like a I don't drink hot coffee almost ever, and I don't drink coffee like my father-in-law is a big like cappuccino or espresso like after dinner thing, which is such a lovely like relaxing ritual to, that kind of like extra little thing to set off dinner. But I'm also like, well, I don't know how you sleep after that.
There is a certain thing like my stepmom and I talk about this all the time. So her mom is a like older Italian American lady in Pittsburgh, and for whatever reason, her like my stepmom's entire like her parents and her aunts and uncles and whatever, for whatever reason, that generation is like they can drink coffee all day. She's like, my mom has a cup of coffee at like 10 p.m. and then she probably like watches the news and then goes to sleep. You know what I mean? Like
that she coffee and the news is like,
I would be up for a week.
Yeah. My parents, like at family gatherings, my dad will do like a pot of coffee or like a Keurig of coffee for whoever wants it. Like, hey, after dinner we had a little dessert, and who wants a coffee with dessert, or like before you head out for the night. And that was like through my whole childhood and still. And now it occurs to me, like, I don't know if I'm just like a more fragile constitution than my ancestors, but like if I was at a friend's house and they were like, hey, we had a great night, would you like a cup of freshly brewed coffee? I'd be like, am I going to stay till tomorrow? Are we solving a murder? What are we doing here?
Yeah. The chief. Yeah, yes, right. Exactly. Yeah, precisely. The chief has told me I can only work on this on my own time. So
yep. Yes.
Yeah, no,
exactly right.
I completely understand what you mean. However, I will say, so Haley and I are very into, or at least were in the previous world, and hopefully will again in the world to come. And by that I hope I don't mean the afterlife. We're very into dinner parties. We really like, having people over for a dinner party, and we did sort of, I think, discover just on our own, almost weirdly like rediscover for ourselves the virtue of like the after dinner like coffee, or like the being able to offer coffee with dessert, I guess is what I'm saying. And the real killer app there for us was decaf.
Yeah,
like being able to offer decaf.
Decaf is such a it feels like oh, were you addicted to coffee? Is that why you're drinking this? But it's so practical, and coffee goes so well with so many pastries. And
yes,
so like,
oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And so decaf, it makes all the sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's just something about it where also it's like decaf is much worse than regular coffee. Like it's very, very bad. Even if you get like decaf from a good place, it's pretty bad because whatever they have to do to it to get the caffeine out of it, it robs the coffee of its like essential life force. The coffee is basically like, I'm just marking time until I'm brewed and then finally I can rest. Like that's it. It has nothing left.
Right.
But
Decaf tastes like coffee that was like fired after 35 years at the same job and told like that their stock options haven't vested, and it's just like, okay, I'll play out the string.
Yeah, decaf is a deflated Arthur Miller protagonist of coffee for sure, but you're also pretty drunk. Hopefully, if it's a good dinner party and you drink, you're probably like you're hopefully not so drunk that you can't drive home, but you are like, you've had a couple drinks and whatever, so you're feeling pretty good. So you're going to have some dessert and you don't mind that decaf doesn't actually taste that good. It's close enough to be like, I'm really enjoying this with dessert. And true. Then for us, we don't have to drive home. So it's like, it's fine. I could even have a regular cup of coffee if I wanted to, because I probably have to stay up and do dishes like we're in, like we're a married couple in like Apollo 13.
Yeah. I love the idea of like using a couple of drinks with dinner to like make decaf coffee delicious in the same way a couple drinks and you're like, Domino's. Now that's what I want. Like,
yeah, pretty much. It is the Domino's of the coffee world. Domino's is decaf pizza.
Pizza.
Although now I think they've worked on a new formula for it, so it's half calf now.
Domino's
which is another thing that I love, and I think only my grandma knows about. Like my stepmom has a like cache of that. Might be part of her secret, actually. I do think sometimes she'll drink like half caffeine coffee, which I didn't even know was a thing.
I didn't know they made it that. I thought it was like everybody, you kind of doctored that in your own home. I didn't know they sold it.
I think that they do because I've seen it, but I think you're right. I think for the most part it is like, oh yeah, you're just going to have regular coffee and you're going to like dilute it with water or whatever. But are you you alluded to it before, are you a year-round iced coffee guy in New York?
I'm a year-round iced coffee guy in New York, preferably, well, again, to speak of the before time,
please.
a Dunkin Donuts partisan. And so I do Dunkin iced coffee all year round, which is in itself like a very weak, gentle coffee to begin with. And I like that because you can drink a lot of it. And I don't like moderate myself well. So I like to go to a place where I'm like, give me the most you can give me in one receptacle. And they're like, great, you'll be able to nap when you're finished. And so I love that. But lately we've been doing like, we'll get those like cubes that they have in every startup office. That's just like a box with a bag in it full of cold brew. And we've been doing those in the morning. Yeah, because my wife is also more of an iced coffee person as well.
There is. So are you from like the Boston area originally?
Yeah.
So it is such, it's become, it's much parodied, but it is a thing. Why do you think that is? If you had to drill down on like, what is the New England Dunkin' connection?
Part of it is saturation.
Okay.
I think it's just everywhere. It was my dad would get like Dunkin' like on the way to work. It's like open at 5 a.m. So like my dad going to like construction jobs in the city would always be able to stop at a Dunkin' on the way into the city to work. And they're open. I think they have like very like working person friendly hours. Like I think they open earlier and are open later than like a Starbucks even. And there just like wasn't that other culture. Like when I was growing up, at least it was like kind of Bickford's or, like an IHOP or Dunkin'. There wasn't that much in the way of like Starbucks saturation where I'm from. And it kind of crept in more gradually, I think. And so it's like a loyalty bred from that. It's like super, they do brand partnerships super well with like beloved local sports teams, which they do in New York too. I remember moving to New York and I've never lived, this is like a weird specific thing that was not engineered in my life, but I've never lived in New York City further than 1 block from a Dunkin' Donuts.
Which
sounds
again,
like
you
it's-
say was not engineered, and it's like clear that it was engineered on a much deeper level than you're aware of.
Yeah. It is like New York City's embassy to me. And the first time I went in, because I was used to seeing like Tom Brady in a Tom Brady cutout, and he's just like, drink this coffee. And you're like, Tom Brady, you don't drink coffee. You drink like water with like the essence of victory distilled into it. And instead of Tom Brady, it was Eli Manning. And I was like, Duncan, you fickle fuck.
It was like seeing your dad, who's a traveling salesman's family in another city, where it was just like, wait a minute.
Right. It was like Dunkin' Donuts had a secret second family, and it was the New York Giants.
Who's Josh?
Yeah. Oh, what an uncreative dad.
Yeah, totally. And here's the thing, Josh. Josh is a little older than you.
So I'm the second one.
Yeah, exactly.
That hurts.
He went to Josh first, and then it was like, Josh, I guess.
Ooh, that's the knockoff Josh.
Yeah, really brutal. But isn't it strange that I feel like I was in New York because I went to NYU starting in 2003. And so I feel like I was there for when we didn't really have a lot of like Dunkin' Donuts growing up. I think there were maybe a couple in Arizona by the time I was leaving, but like maybe not. There definitely are now. But I was in New York when they first started to be like, Dunkin' is really starting to like try to make a play for like New York City proper.
Yeah. And
like, that was a thing.
It's pretty prevalent here. And again, I think it's like, I think the price is a little lower than some of the other chains. And it's like really geared towards like, you get your coffee and they have like flavor stuff. And like, they're always kind of like adding to the menu, sometimes in ways that are like, oh, I'm glad they have this. And like, they have a Beyond Sausage sandwich now. And I saw it first. They piloted it at a few stores, but at the Penn Station Dunkin' Donuts, they would have it. So whenever I would go home, I would take the Amtrak, and so I would stop there, and I was like, oh, I should have this instead of sausage. It's like the idea. I mean, it's slightly better than this, but it was like whole wheat instead of white bread.
Yes.
But it is like it's like such an easy way to cut the corner because like the quality of a Dunkin' Donuts sausage sandwich is so similar to the quality of a Dunkin' Donuts Beyond Sausage. This is like gourmet farm to table sausage, so it's like a very easy substitution.
Sorry, please go ahead.
But I was going to say, so I think it is just like it's in and out. It's like if someone was like, I'm sitting and writing a novel in a Dunkin' Donuts, I would be like, is the novel about this Dunkin' Donuts?
Which I would absolutely read. And I feel like Dunkin' themselves would put out because they're very good at merchandising.
Very good. But I think that, the only people I ever see like hanging out in Dunkin' Donuts are like occasionally teens, but usually it's like old men from like 5 to 10 a.m.
Yes, precisely. And it is one of those things where it's like, this is the neighborhood like social club. You're a little bit like, oh, this is maybe where if there's like the absolute like last little echoes of a mob war that started in the 70s are being like ironed out here by some guys that are the only ones that still remember. And maybe it got like drug up again last year because of the Irishman a little bit. They're like, oh right, we forgot to kill that one guy.
They're the only 6 guys alive from like all sides of all the gangs, and they're just friends with each other now.
Yeah, okay. We're writing that. Gonna clip that out.
I actually do love this as a cast of characters of like all the other guys are dead, and they're just like, we're like, didn't you kill my brother? And you're like, well, didn't you wanna? I'm like, all right. Yeah.
Fuck. Why isn't Frank Vincent still alive? And can we, does he have a brother who wants to be involved in this project? Yeah, I do. I will say, when you were talking about the quality, alluding to the quality of the Dunkin' Donuts, like croissant and sausage and egg and cheese sandwich earlier, the quality that you were alluding to, I think we should say is tremendous. That is such a good sandwich. I love that sandwich.
The Beyond
so
Sausage
much.
Sandwich?
No, even just
the regular one.
But I have had the Beyond one for exactly the same reason, which is I was like, I would, when I would be like on like a writing gig where it's like, okay, I'm going into an office for like a month at a time or whatever, and we have a Dunkin' near us in LA, because it's like right now where I feel like it was in New York City in like 2005, where it's like, okay, we're making incursions, into the landscape. And there is a Starbucks across the street, and it has now outlasted the Starbucks, which goes Dunkin'. Again, I don't know why I feel that way, why it feels like Dunkin' is such a sort of like, hardworking American brand that weirdly has its own sort of cachet, whereas I'm like, yeah, fuck Starbucks. Like, I'm sure if you get under the hood, like they're the same in terms of, I don't know, whatever terrible politicians they give to or whatever. But for some reason, I really do feel that way about Dunkin' Donuts. But all that to say, I'm not good at being on time. And so I would often be like, oh, fuck, I shouldn't show up to this job with like a Dunkin' Donuts coffee and a whatever sandwich. But if I do show up having already eaten the sandwich, then I won't have to eat when I get there. So I'm actually saving them time. So I should stop at Dunkin' and wait in line and get the thing. And then when they introduce their app and you're able to like just like have it waiting for you when you get there, and you can tip on the app and you can do all the stuff you can do, then that suddenly became like, well, now I definitely don't have to leave myself enough time because I'm saving all this time using the app that I can be even later. Because go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Because you're sorry.
No. Yeah. Please.
I was going to say, I think this is the secret of Dunkin' Donuts. I think the savory foods are better than the sweet foods for the most part.
100%.
Like
100%.
The breakfast sandwiches are super good. The donuts themselves are like, it's like adequate. The blueberry cake donut is really good. And the others are kind of like totally fine donuts. But like, I love the iced coffee. I love those breakfast sandwiches, and the Beyond breakfast sandwich. It's like somebody smarter than me, I think, I'm sure, but like somebody smarter than me has said like a key to making more plant-based or less meat-based eating appealing to people is just like putting it in their face and making it easy. And that is like the easiest possible option is like Dunkin' Donuts having it.
Yes, and it does alleviate some of what I would have getting that sandwich most days, where I'd be like, I shouldn't have fucking eaten 3 of these in a week. Are you kidding me? Like, it's so bad for you. It's got to be so bad. And then also just eating it with a metric gallon of iced coffee, because I also really like their iced coffee. And a metric gallon's not a thing, by the way. I think that's a complete contradiction in terms. I think there's, in fact, by definition, and not a non-metric gallon.
Right, metric is gallon is the imperial. Is that the measurement?
Yeah, Her Majesty's. It's the whatever Her Majesty can hold in her purse at any given time. That is legally a gallon. In Greenwich, I think, is how it's determined.
Right, the international gallon line.
But then it did when I feel like they didn't have it for a long time before I stopped having to or needing to or being allowed to like go anywhere in the world. But in that short interval, I did get the Beyond sandwich a couple of times, strictly for that reason of like alleviating a little bit of that feeling of like, I'm already guilty about being a little bit late. I'm already guilty about eating this sandwich 3 times this week. Okay, I can cross one of those things off the list because I'm getting the Beyond sandwich.
Yes, which is similar in the quarantine version of that. It was just like eating whatever from any restaurant, doing takeout and being like, I'm supporting a local business.
Yes, precisely. And it feels, honestly, it feels so good on so many levels. We have not gotten a whole lot of takeout. We haven't ordered out a ton in this time. We've just been, on a pretty good rhythm with like cooking at home. But when we do just go like, let's get takeout right now, it's incredible.
It's so good. It feels
I realize I had you on my cooking podcast to talk about cooking. Then all we've talked about is not cooking and getting food other places. But I feel like that's part of it. I feel like that's the yin to the yang, is you have to acknowledge like, sometimes part of cooking is not cooking.
Yes, totally. I think that's true. And somebody cooked.
Exactly. Yes, precisely. All right, that is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to my guest, Josh Gondelman. Again, please check out his podcast, Make My Day, and please rate and subscribe to this podcast wherever you cast your pods or pods your casts or whatever it is you do. Please return next week for the second half of my conversation with Josh. And in the meantime, what else do I have to tell you? Oh yeah, my interstitial music is by Advanced Bass, the amazing Owen Ashworth. My intro music is the song July 4th, 2004 by Jason Anderson. My podcast art is by Sarah Beacon, that is Becan. Please return for the show as you know and hopefully like it next week. In the meantime, thanks again to Josh. Thanks again to you, and I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.